Well, about a month ago, I was at the seminary Regina Apostolorum, about 5 miles west of St. Peter, so on the edge of Rome. I was there for what they call Baby Bishop School. It's a formal school for all those who were named bishop in the previous year. It's kind of a training camp for us. And it was fairly Spartan accommodations. It reminded me of my college seminary room. It was a small room, unair conditioned. The bed was, I don't know, like maybe 2.5 feet wide. A lot of us said that we were worried about rolling out of bed the first couple nights. Food is pretty good in the Italian style. But I'll tell you the best thing about Baby Bishop School was the opportunity to be with, in my case, 156 other bishops from around the world. In fact, it was the biggest class of new bishops since they started the school many years ago. But you'd meet people at lunch and dinner and breakfast from Ghana, from the Philippines, from Canada, from Scotland, all over the world. So it was a wonderful chance to get a sense of the universality of the church. I'll tell you a typical day at New Bishop School. 7:30 we gather in a very nice chapel for morning prayer sung, which was then integrated into Mass. And the Mass was celebrated typically by one of the curial cardinals or archbishops, so the people in charge of these congregations and dicasteries in the Vatican. And the idea was to introduce the bishops from around the world to these figures in Rome. Mass is followed by the breakfast, which usually involved conversing in a variety of languages. I was kind of stressed to the limit. My French is pretty good from my years in Paris. I spoke French to the Canadians and to the French and some of the Africans. My Spanish is like okay, and so I would try Spanish out once in a while. My Italian is a little bit beyond like restaurant Italian, so I didn't get too far with that. But you were kind of stressed to the limits at the meals. Breakfast was followed by a formal talk. So we go to an auditorium, and they had simultaneous translation. So we all had the headsets. But the talks were given in a variety of languages, whatever the nationality of the speaker was. So they'd be in French and Spanish, Italian, various things. Never in English, by the way. And I would usually try my best to follow it, for at least several minutes. I often would get tired out and I'd listen to the English translation. Talks are followed by pretty lively Q&A sessions with the bishops. The afternoon, we'd have another major, formal presentation. They'd be followed by what the Italians call circoli minori, which means little circles. It means the small groups. And they were determined by language. So the English speakers would all go off. I think there were about 37 or 8 English speakers. So we were a big contingent. And there we would talk about the presentations. And we kind of horse around a little bit too and just have fun and relax. I remember one night, and these sessions, mind you, would resume in the evening after dinner. So they'd go until, 10:30 at night. But one of the days they announced that they were going to ask 8 bishops from around the world to speak on their country and what are the challenges facing the church, etc. I remember distinctly thinking, oh gosh, those poor guys, that will be asked, and maybe I'll find a way of skipping that session. Well, proving that God has a sense of humor, Cardinal Ouellette, who's the head of the bishop's congregation, and he's the guy running the whole operation. He approached me at one of the little breaks, and he said, would you be willing to give the talk on America? So I had to go. Well, it turned out really, I thought that was one of the better sessions, the 8 people that presented. And I talked a little bit about the challenge of secularism, about the threats to religious liberty, the loss of young people in the church, et cetera, and then a lot of other positive things too. But boy, you get a sense of perspective because the bishop from Aleppo spoke, from Syria, who's in the middle of this horrific civil war. So what it's like to be a leader of that church. A bishop spoke from Sydney, Australia. We had a bishop from Reykjavik in Iceland. And so you really get a sense of the universality of the church. And it puts your own challenges and struggles sort of in perspective, I think for all of us, the highlight of Baby Bishop School was Friday, so the end of the week. We all had an audience with Pope Francis. So we went to the Sala Clementina, which is this extraordinary room in the Vatican palace, and we waited for a while, and then in came the Pope. And he spoke for about 30 minutes. He gave us a long discourse. Now, it was in Italian, and the room was kind of echoey, and I mean, my Italian's not that great, so I was only able to get bits of it. But I later read it in English, and his great motif was, you were all chosen during the year of mercy. And so keep that in mind. May it be the leitmotif of your time as bishop. And he said, I forget the Italian word exactly, but he said, you were all fished out by the divine mercy, like we're fished out of the sea of sin and so on. And now your job is to fish other people out with the same divine mercy. So I remember that. But then the Pope stayed and spent time with every single bishop, which is pretty impressive for an 80-year-old man to meet 157 bishops one by one. The three of us from Los Angeles who were made bishops together a year ago stood in line together. And in the past, he's referred to the three of us, to Archbishop Gomez, as your triplets. You know, he'd say, how are your triplets doing? So when the first of us, Bishop Joe Brennan, came up, he saw the Pope and said, I'm one of the triplets of Arzobispo Gomez. And I saw the Pope's face just lit up, and he said, ¿Dónde están los otros? Like, where are the others? And so we came forward, and the Pope very warmly greeted us. And I must say, I mean, to my great surprise, he knew the work of Word on Fire. He knew the work that our whole team has been doing over the past many years. So I was very, touched by that and very lifted up by it. I'll tell you one more little story about that week. I think it was Thursday of that week at the Mass in the morning. They would sing songs from all over the world, in all the different languages. There's songs in Spanish, Italian, German, French, all over. Well, on Thursday, they sang in English, Here I Am, Lord, for the communion meditation. Well, I've heard Here I Am, Lord about 10,000 times in my life. And when I was coming of age, we sang that song all the time. If I were planning a liturgy today, I would probably not choose Here I Am, Lord. Just it's been so overdone. But I must say, as I sat there with these bishops from all over the world and the choir, and people really knew that song, and they were taking up, the words, that I found it very moving. Because I thought, well, it's true. I mean, at a certain point in my life, I did hear the Lord calling, and so did everybody else in that room. And all of us, in our different ways and different backgrounds and all that, all of us did say some version of, Here I am, Lord, send me. And it led us to that room in Rome as bishops of the church. And so it was kind of, to me, a fitting summation of that whole week's experience. In God's mysterious providence, I've been called into this new role, and to be, in the presence of the successor of Peter, who has called us into this task. I just found that, very moving. And I found the whole week, even though it had its rigors, as a wonderful, really uplifting experience.